A punch knockout is the most common and recognizable finish in UFC history. It happens when a fighter lands a clean punch that causes a temporary loss of consciousness or leaves the opponent unable to intelligently defend themselves. While almost any punch can end a fight, the most dangerous targets are usually the chin, jaw, temple, and side of the head. A well-timed strike can rapidly rotate the head, causing the brain to move inside the skull and briefly disrupt normal function. What makes punch knockouts so important is their simplicity. Unlike spinning attacks or flying techniques, every fighter trains punches from the first day they enter a gym. The difference between a regular punch and a knockout punch often comes down to timing, accuracy, and positioning rather than pure strength. Some fighters become famous almost entirely because of their punching power. One of the most famous examples came at UFC 194 when Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo in just 13 seconds. Another classic example is Francis Ngannou's knockout of Alistair Overeem at UFC 218, where a devastating uppercut produced one of the most memorable finishes in UFC history. Head kick knockouts occur when a fighter lands a kick directly to the opponent's head, usually using the shin as the primary point of contact. Because the legs are capable of generating enormous force, a clean head kick can end a fight instantly, regardless of how competitive the contest had been beforehand. Head kicks often require careful setup. Fighters may throw punches to draw their opponent's attention downward before suddenly attacking high. Others disguise kicks behind feints or combinations. At UFC 129, when Lyoto Machida knocked out Randy Couture with a jumping front kick, Couture collapsed immediately. Another famous example is at UFC Fight Night 89, when Stephen Thompson knocked out Johnny Hendricks with a perfectly placed head kick. A body shot knockout is different from most other knockouts because the target is not the head. Instead, fighters attack vulnerable areas of the torso, particularly the liver, solar plexus, or ribs. The opponent may remain conscious, yet their body simply refuses to cooperate because of the intense pain and physical reaction. Liver shots are especially feared in combat sports. A perfectly placed strike to the liver can cause an immediate shutdown response that leaves a fighter unable to continue. Many athletes describe the sensation as overwhelming and impossible to fight through. A standing knee knockout uses the same striking surface as a flying knee, but is delivered without leaving the ground. These strikes are commonly thrown from the clinch, where fighters are close together and have limited space to generate power with punches. Standing knees are particularly dangerous because opponents often do not see them coming. A fighter controlling the clinch can pull an opponent into the strike, dramatically increasing its impact. The short distance also makes defensive reactions much more difficult. A notable example occurred at UFC Fight Night 48 when Donald Cerrone landed a crushing knee against Jim Miller before finishing the fight. Another memorable case came when Anderson Silva frequently used knees from the Muay Thai clinch during his championship reign. These knockouts highlight the effectiveness of close-range striking and the influence of traditional Muay Thai techniques on modern MMA. Elbows are among the sharpest and most damaging strikes allowed in the UFC. Unlike gloves that spread impact over a larger area, the elbow concentrates force into a small point. This can create knockouts, cuts, or both at the same time. Elbow knockouts usually happen during close-range exchanges, against the cage, or on the ground. Fighters often use them when there is not enough room to throw full punches. Because elbows travel short distances, opponents frequently fail to react in time. One of the most famous elbow knockouts occurred at UFC 187 when Travis Browne finished Brendan Schaub with a series of devastating elbows from the clinch. Spinning strike knockouts occur when fighters use rotational movement to generate power. These attacks include spinning back fists, spinning elbows, spinning heel kicks, and spinning wheel kicks. The momentum created by the spin can produce tremendous force when executed correctly. The challenge with spinning attacks is risk. Turning away from an opponent even briefly can create openings. Because of this, fighters must have excellent timing and awareness before attempting them. When they connect, however, the results are often unforgettable. A legendary example happened at UFC Fight Night 26 when Uriah Hall knocked out Adam Cella with a spinning hook kick during his time on The Ultimate Fighter. Another famous case came at UFC 142 when Edson Barboza delivered a spinning wheel kick knockout against Terry Etim. The finish is still widely regarded as one of the greatest knockouts in UFC history and helped establish Barboza as one of the sport's most dangerous strikers. Ground and pound knockouts happen after a fighter gains a dominant position on the mat and begins landing strikes against a grounded opponent. Instead of seeking a submission, the attacking fighter uses punches, elbows, and hammer fists to force a stoppage. This type of knockout became especially important during the early years of the UFC. Wrestlers discovered that controlling an opponent on the ground allowed them to strike with relative safety while limiting their opponent's ability to escape. Over time, ground and pound evolved into one of the sport's most effective finishing methods. One of the best examples came at UFC 116 when Brock Lesnar overwhelmed Shane Carwin with heavy top pressure before eventually securing a submission. For a pure knockout example, Khabib Nurmagomedov's finish of Michael Johnson at UFC 205 demonstrated how relentless ground strikes can break down an opponent. Ground and pound remains a cornerstone of modern MMA strategy because it combines control with offensive pressure. Counter-strike knockouts occur when a fighter punishes an opponent immediately after they attempt an attack. Instead of leading the exchange, the counter-striker waits for a mistake and capitalizes on the opening that follows. This style requires patience, timing, and sharp reflexes. Counter fighters often appear calm and defensive until the perfect opportunity presents itself. Because the attacking fighter is already moving forward, the impact of the counterstrike can become even more powerful. One of the greatest examples happened at UFC 193 when Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey. Holm repeatedly countered Rousey's forward movement before landing a head kick that finished the fight. A combination knockout results from a sequence of strikes rather than a single finishing blow. Fighters use multiple punches, kicks, knees, or elbows to overwhelm an opponent's defenses until one final strike ends the contest. Combinations are a key part of high-level striking because every strike creates opportunities for the next. A jab may open the path for a cross. A body shot may lower an opponent's guard and expose the head. The finishing strike is often only possible because of the work done by the strikes before it. A famous example occurred at UFC 202 when Conor McGregor repeatedly landed combinations against Nate Diaz throughout the fight, scoring multiple knockdowns. A walk-off knockout is not defined by the strike itself, but by what happens immediately afterward. The attacking fighter lands a decisive blow and instantly turns away, knowing the fight is over before the referee officially intervenes. These moments are relatively rare because fighters are trained to continue until the referee stops the contest. When a walk-off occurs, it usually means the knockout was so clean that no additional strikes were necessary. One of the most famous examples came at UFC Fight Night 89 when Stephen Thompson knocked out Johnny Hendricks and immediately walked away as Hendricks fell to the canvas. A flash knockout occurs when a fighter briefly loses consciousness or awareness for only a fraction of a second. Unlike a prolonged knockout where a fighter remains unconscious, a flash knockout often allows the athlete to recover almost immediately. Despite the quick recovery, the result can still determine the outcome of a fight. Referees must decide whether a fighter can intelligently defend themselves, and even a brief loss of consciousness can create an opening for follow-up strikes or a stoppage. A well-known example occurred during several fights involving Frankie Edgar, whose remarkable durability allowed him to recover from knockdowns that might have finished many other athletes. Another example can be seen in numerous championship fights where fighters momentarily lose awareness before scrambling back to their feet. Flash knockouts serve as a reminder that in mixed martial arts, a single second can be enough to change everything.